Right, welcome everybody. We have apologies for absence from Jackie Lawless, Sean Stacey, Pete Shanahan, and I think we have Sarah possibly joining us on Teams at some stage. Katie Kapnas is away, and Charlie is resplendent in pink on Teams. You have the whole screen to yourself, Charlie, so very welcome. I'm very pleased to say that our Director of Nursing, Sheila Lloyd, will be late because she's doing a series of media interviews following the International Day of the Nurse yesterday, when we had a huge profile on our new matrons. And I was going to report this in my report, but I'm just going to touch on it now. The Minister came, all 9 matrons were there, all of whom spoke with such passion and commitment about their jobs and Manx care and the people they serve. It was, if you bottled it, it was something that I'd want to be out there selling. It was fantastic. And Sheila's leadership was outstanding. And I know that people have been listening into Manx Radio. It's always challenging doing live interviews, particularly when they go on for some time. And apparently she was doing a really good job. So I'm delighted she's going to be late, but that's why. And she will be joining us as soon as it's finished and done with. Are there any new declarations of interest pertaining to this meeting? No, thank you. And then the minutes of the last meeting were from the 11th of March, which on this gorgeous summer's day does seem like months ago, doesn't it? Can we go through the minutes, please? Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 10 of the minutes, thank you. And then the matters arising and the action log. I think, Elaine, we are fairly on track with this, aren't we? We have the update on breast radiology, which is obviously key to our service, coming later on the agenda. And we asked a question about the faith leadership, and the answer is in the minutes. And I was really pleased to see that there was an interdenominational actual service held here. I think that's really important. And we did at one point say we would ask the chaplaincy team to come and talk about their work in due course. That's in plan, I think. And the others are all closed. So we have no outstanding actions. Well done, everyone. Thank you. Any items of other business that I've not been notified about as yet? No? Thank you. So we're welcoming Michelle. Thank you. So we're going to hear about intermediate care. This is a concept that didn't exist when I was training. I know I'm really ancient, but it is a hugely important area of clinical service. So it's a really welcome to the board, and looking forward to your presentation. So I'll hand over to you.
So I've labelled this as intermediate care for now and the opportunity possible. Because I think there are many opportunities to develop this service further. So this is a definition of intermediate care. And I know some of you have previously seen my presentations when I was presenting to board and to BCRG in regards to implementing intermediate care. And it did take us 4 years to get there, but we are now there, we're up and running. And so some of this is where we've been, and some of this is what we've achieved, and the other bit is where we might be heading. So intermediate care is a range of time-limited services implemented following illness, injury, or incident, which ensure continuity and quality of care, promote recovery, restore independence and confidence at the interface between home and acute services. So that's the standard definition that's used across the UK. So we broke that down into 4 main areas: re-ablement, which is supporting people in their own homes who have perhaps had a little bit of a downturn in their functional ability. And then we go in and support those to get back hopefully to their baseline or assume a new baseline. Crisis response is where we're attempting to keep people out of hospital that don't require to be placed within a hospital bed, and managing their condition in the community when medically optimised. We then offer home-based rehabilitation in and around, again, supporting those at home, supporting discharges earlier than was previously delivered. And we also have a bed-based, which is currently at Martin Ward, where it's not around if the patient still requires medical intervention. It's about if the risk for the person is too great to be at home, then we can use that bed base to establish, some more intensive rehabilitation to get them to the point of where they can be at home safely with equipment and care, support and rehabilitation. So those are the aims. I think I've sort of gone through that really. But return home more quickly, comprehensive care planning, intensive support, helping you to recover in your own home rather than being admitted into hospital, and to increase and maintain people's independence within their own home. So this was our initial pathway that we set out in our project plan. So you can see the significant number of referring services into us. And that was coming at the time through an ICE referral system. It was then being triaged by our advanced clinical practitioners. And what we did was we put advanced clinical practitioners at the beginning of the pathway. So it's a bit like tipping healthcare upside down. We've had a lot of healthcare in the past of where it starts at a lower level and then you escalate and then you escalate again and you build in waiting time into that. Whereas what we attempted to do was then put our advanced clinical practitioners at the beginning of that pathway and then disseminating down and making appropriate decisions for the patient. I still call them patients. The colleagues that I now work with are far more social care based. So I'm trying to get used to client or person service user. But I still fall into, I've been 35 years in the health service and mainly acute-based services for a lot of that. So I still have a habit falling into patient. Tim's laughing at me.
Never too late.
Never too late to change. So then we would offer crisis response at a 2-hour turnaround time. 24 hours is for our facilitated discharge and rehabilitation and step down. And then 58 hours is for those people who are already out in the community who require intervention to remain well, and stay at home. So that was the sort of pathway that we said that we were going to attempt to roll out. And so what we were actually given the go-ahead to take this from a project through into implementation with the funds that we needed to put all of the staff in place. And what we were using was a re-ablement team that we already had in place and actually super boosting that. So adding in the advanced clinical practitioners, adding in OTs, physios, social worker, additional administrators to be able to handle an increase in the referral rate. So that's who currently makes up our team. We also have referral and assessment officers which go out and actually do the home assessments to ensure that the home environment is safe, what are the goals of the person, and then they also help to implement the care plans, which are holistic care plans across both therapies and care support. So we have restorative care workers, which is of course the backbone of what we deliver. You know, we can put as many care plans in as we want, but if we don't have those to actually be able to deliver that, then hence why they are the higher number. There are client facing. So if you notice, all of our staff, apart from the administrators, do offer frontline service. So, you know, I've been out in the last couple of days doing assessments and ACP assessments, even though I'm head of service. I think it also helps to enable you to, especially when you're developing service, see where that hasn't gone quite so well, that is going well, what can we do differently to make that process easier, more seamless, lean and things like that. So I do make sure that I go out and I still keep my clinical hat. I'm a physiotherapist by trade, so I still utilise those skills within this. So that's a little bit about where we came from. So we started the service in March 24. So we're just over our 1 year, and some of the stuff that I'll then feed into is what we've done in our first year. So some of the things that we have changed since our project plan is that we've broadened our criteria from acute illness, trauma or operation to recent deterioration in functional ability. So that includes a lot of frail patients that may be out there in the community that have just started to take a bit of a downturn. We might be able to get in there earlier. So we're not necessarily waiting now for some sort of accident, injury or illness, and we're picking up patients far sooner in that pathway. So we're also been working with Nick Fripp in social care to implement the optimisation of care package with reablement input. So that's around patients who are presenting, who have gone to the wellbeing partnerships and said, I think I need some additional care. And so they're coming through to us so that we can add a clinical element into that to determine, is there something else that we can be doing? Could we be adding in equipment, or is there some sort of functional restoration goals that we can achieve with the person to try and minimise any long-term care requirement? So we're also now supporting patients who wish to return home after respite or care home stays. So that's another additional thing that we are now looking at doing, again with the social work team supporting us in regards to identifying those service users who may find that beneficial. So we've also implemented referral pathways or improved our referral pathway, accepting referrals from MIU and MACU alongside of ED. We've changed to a type 4 referral rather than an ICE, and that has then benefited the ambulance department.
Did you say what an ICE is?
Oh, ICE is it's a particular platform which we use or within the hospital to request things like blood tests and x-rays, and it also can be used to request things like physiotherapy within the hospital. So we were using that at the time because it was an easy way to track the referrals coming in. But then we've worked with Gregor Pedden to use the type form, which is the e-referral system on the SharePoint. So now it makes it just an awful lot easier for the social workers, especially for the paramedics that are out there. They can use their iPads now to go directly onto it. And so we can, instead of it then coming through something like Clinical Navigator and then to us, or them ringing up the ACP and doing it that way, they can now actually just put in a direct referral to us. And there's also a QR code, so you can actually just put your phone up to the QR code and it will take you directly to our referral. So it just means that it's just made that far more accessible.
Yeah.
And we're also doing a piece of work in regards to ensuring that we get the right person to actually go and see the patient at the right time. So making sure that we're using our ACPs, our referral and assessment officers, and now we're adding in some trusted assessors and using our therapists far more effectively in doing those initial responses, rather than it just being the ACPs. So we're actually utilising all of our staff so that we're making sure that we're getting the right level of staff to appropriately attend the patient. So staffing wise, we have utilised some business as usual monies to add in an additional ACP. What we were finding is that because we follow the advanced clinical practice framework and we try and follow that quite closely, there are other pillars of practice other than just the clinical aspect which the ACPs need to do. So we've added in an additional ACP to make sure that we've still got our duty roster, which is our duty roster is 8 till 8, 7 days a week. And then they still have some additional hours to then be able to operate under the other pillars of practice, including research, audit, service development, training, those sorts of aspects as well. We added in an additional social worker because we only had one social worker, and we quickly realised that that was a single point of failure for us. So we've added in an additional social worker, and we've added an administrator who's then managing all of the referrals and making sure that we've got the right information uploaded onto we use Rio as our documentation. So for that administrator, and of course it also means that we've always got somebody between our 9 till 5 days of the week on the phone, being able to answer questions, queries, be able to contact the staff if there's somebody who's gone into hospital or somebody who's had a fall, or we can respond far more appropriately with that. So this was our budget. I can't quite see the end bit there. But so this was our transformation drawdown. So this was what we were allocated over the 3 years from transformation. And you can see that's what our forecast is for this coming year. Right. So that's on top of what our business as usual monies were for the reablement team as was. So our business as usual reablement budget year on year is 1.2 million. Our transformation budget for 24-25 was 1.136. So the total budget forecast for 24-25 is 2.3. But this then is what we did in the year. So we had this was from March 24 to February 25. So we had crisis responses from the community 23, crisis responses from ED, so that's stopping them at the front door from going into hospital 77, crisis response direct from the control room. So that's where the ambulance service has looked at the criteria, and it's a concept which they use. I think Chris Whitty used it in the UK to start off with, of take from the stack, and so that's something that we're just starting to see emerging for us. Facilitated discharge from hospital, 493. And community enablement, 71. Now, we started to realise early on that actually our community referrals had dropped off. And when we then spoke with the Wellbeing Partnership, they indicated that they thought that intermediate care was only for acute services. So we've had to do quite a piece of work, and I think that's where Nick's come in. Nick from social care has come in, and we've really then started to establish that more community pathway for the Wellbeing Partnerships. And from February, we've been getting far more from that side. So that was some learning in and around how we communicated, obviously, because they thought we were far more of an acute service rather than a holistic service. So the mean length of stay for our demographic is 33 days. The average length of stay reduction from our implementation to now is 21 days. So our average length of stay has reduced by 21 days. So single day costs, those cost figures have come directly from the commercial director, just so how I'm working that out. So that's the cost avoidance per patient in each area. So the total cost avoidance is 4.748 million in a year. So I know that isn't necessarily cash out in your hands, but that's from where we were to where we are, cost avoidance. So some of our changes in especially around flow metrics is around, we were at 44 days down to 23 days, offering 21-day reduction in bed stay. The emergency department attendance is down 3.9% in the last year. I know that's not wholly to do with intermediate care, but we it was one of our key performance indicators to look at that, and I think we have contributed looking at the numbers of patients that we're seeing outside of hospital now. And also the mean number of medical outliers is down from 25 to about 14 in the first year. So these are just some of the graphs that we pulled out. So I think the interesting one is the Opal 4. So we did a bit of a soft rollout, and then after the launch, you can see quite a difference in the Opal 4.
Just explain Opal 4 too.
So Opal 4 is the state of the hospital. It's sort of the level at which the hospital is operating. So it's about how many people you have in ED, how many beds you have available, whether there's any ambulances waiting. And so you score it on that, everything from an Opal 1 to an Opal 4, Opal 4 being the highest one. And so you can see the number of times that an Opal 4 has been called is significantly less now post-launch than it was pre-intermediate care. So, and the other one that's had quite a significant downturn since we started and implemented service is the emergency readmission within 30 days. That again has had quite a stark reduction in that. So,
I'll just ask a quick question, Wayne.
Yeah.
Can we track individual people, not patients? Can we track individual people? You mentioned there around the reduction in readmissions. So can you actually track the individual working with intermediate care and then potentially knock back into hospital? Does that make any sense rather than global numbers?
I haven't found a way of doing that yet, but we've only just, and some people around the room will know, every single time I've been at TMOG, I've been going on about, are we anywhere closer to BI yet? Are we anywhere closer to the top of BI list? So we got that in February.
Yeah.
So those are some of the things that we are looking at in regards to how we might be able to track that. But we have only just got BI on board with us from February. So we're still building our dashboard from that point of view. So that one is just a global,
that's great.
not from an individual. We do our own internal about any of our own patients that do get readmitted and why that has occurred, and whether it's been based around a further medical incident, whether it's been around something around a home risk. So we do track that to make sure that we're learning from any of those, but we don't sort of specifically, take it individual by individual. So this is just a little piece around call confirm. So call confirm is a method that's used within community support services to actually be able to ensure that all of the capacity that you have within the service is utilised. So it's, as I said, it's already used in community support, and we'd quite like to adopt it within intermediate care, as we feel that we will be able to better utilise our capacity within the service and make sure that we're not getting that we're utilising everything that we have. But also at the moment, just rejigging all of the rosters and trying to get people put in the right place is taking up literally one whole-time equivalent referral and assessment officer. So we could release that person's time, which is the equivalent of a further 10 more patients that we could take per week, and get their assessments completed if we were to implement call confirm. So we're currently just trying to get a quote from call confirm to see whether we can add it on then to what we've already got. And again, that will then improve our capacity, allow us to be able to see additional service users per week. So the administration of our roster at the moment is taking near enough one whole-time equivalent RAM to do that, and we could release that. So in April, so these again some of the developments. In April, we started the new pathway for working with social care in and around the new care packages, and looking and making sure that we're optimising those before establishing long-term care packages. So trying to give it the minimal amount of intervention required and keeping people as independent as possible. The other thing that we're currently looking at developing, and we're actually going to hopefully trial it next week in the MAID event, and that is the concept of a trawler team. So that's where we utilise a member of staff to actually trawl the wards to try and see if we can identify people that may fit with intermediate care, but also fit with a D2A approach. So D2A is discharge to assess. That's where instead of the old model of where you might have taken somebody home, you might have done an access visit, you might have then taken them and seen whether they could actually do their tasks at home, and then you'd have brought them back to hospital, and then they would have had a discharge date. Actually, let's do that all in one go. Let's go home. It's sometimes also called jump in the ambulance approach. So actually you get in your car straight after they're going home and you meet them there. So D2A is about doing that assessment at home, and if they can stay home with care, support, intervention, equipment, actually leave them at home at that point and then release the bed. So we're going to be trialling that during the main event next week, to see whether that's something that we can look at doing. And then maybe even then putting that through as a transformation to really try and get that new way of working and new practice embedded within our more risk-averse colleagues across the organisation. So some of the other things that we are looking at, so virtual wards is one of them. So virtual wards is also my little baby at the moment. So I have put in a proposal document There are a few things I just need to add to that when I get feedback from so some of the things I realised from the first project that we desperately need is BI time and time from, especially virtual wards. We need something from IT, from clinical informatics, that sort of thing. So I'm just waiting for feedback from them as to what we might need from them in the proposal document. But looking at it, if you just did a frailty virtual ward, the cost avoidance would not be as great as if on the Isle of Man you put in a mixed virtual ward. So just purely because most of your frail patients will require a significant amount of care to go along with that, whereas actually in a mixed ward you could have people that are just on monitoring. So especially some of the aspects around cardiac failure or long-term monitoring for some of the respiratory patients. So you will potentially get more bang for your buck if we put in a virtual ward that was of mixed rather than just frailty. But there's a bigger, wider document that is coming along for that. We've also going to establish a non-weight bearing rehabilitation pathway. Currently, if you are non-weight bearing and there is nothing else from a rehab point of view, sometimes what happens is you end up being placed into respite, and sometimes those are the ones that then fall through the gap. Whereas actually what we'd be able to do is identify those patients at the point of when they're non-weight bearing and actually place them, in inverted commas, into our bed base for intermediate care, whether that be at Martin Ward, whether that be in a nursing or residential home, but they'd be effectively sitting with us to then pick up at the time when they then go from non-weight bearing to allowing to be able to rehab. So they then won't get lost in that. Just another thing from a bed-based point of view in the community, just to say that we need to be looking at whether we can establish a bed base outside of Martin Ward and what that might look like and whether we'll need to tender for that. But there is a potential for about a 50% cost reduction in being able to do that. Community falls pickup service is the other aspect that we're looking at with the ambulance service, that we might be able to, again, it's that whole aspect of taking from the staff, that actually for some of those patients who just had a non-injurious fall, we might be able to go help them up off the floor and put in what is required, rather than an ambulance crew going out to them. And that's just some of our feedback.
Gosh. Michelle, just fantastic. Thank you very much. Open up to questions. Chris, first off the blocks. Oh, welcome, Sheila.
Our media style.
Yes. Have you got your entourage with you? Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Michelle. So I know what's involved in setting up an intermediate service, and I wonder whether you realise just what you've achieved in a year. I think I'm kind of quite blown away by how much you do in just a year, and to be honest. So the team needs to take the credit for that and no one else. I don't think you should apologise for calling the people that you care for patients. Okay. You're absolutely right that there is a risk of over-medicalising in an intermediate service, intermediate care service. But the fact that you're having that healthy debate about what you call your service users actually is really important. And continuing that tension is the sweet spot, because it means you're getting pressure from people who think you're over-medicalising, and you're getting pressure from people who think you may be missing some of the social determinants and the other things. So having that healthy debate is the right lane to be in. I also think you're absolutely right to keep those referral pathways as vague as they are, because intermediate care services are kind of like the jelly that sits in amongst everything else, aren't they? And it constantly moves around.
What we try and say is that we're not a wrong door. Exactly that. So yeah. Even if it's not quite for us, then we'll find another door for you.
Exactly that. I think you'll always get pressure from hospital services wanting to step down people, but don't ever lose to lose sight of the fact that, at least in my opinion, it's the step up that is more important. You know, continue to do the work there in that step up space. I think it is so important, and the reason it's important is when you start counting value rather than counting pounds. And I think you've done a really great job on the health economic stuff there, because it's really hard to count the value of intermediate care services. And people then revert to counting costs and struggle sometimes to be able to demonstrate a financial return. You are demonstrating a financial return, but if you are actually capturing value through the eyes of the people using it, the return is even greater than what you've put on there. So I just think it's great, and count me in for anything I can do to help.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Well, where do I start? Michelle, I thought that presentation was absolutely terrific. Thank you very much. It will be no secret to you, we spend a lot of time talking about money around this table, too much in my view. But to have your presentation and to hear your story about care and the way you've also weaved in the value considerations, I thought was absolutely terrific, and really, really appreciated it. And my question was, what can we do to help you do more of this? You know, in terms of BI, I picked up on that. I picked up on clinical informatics. I mean, Gregor would be all over this like a bad rash, no pun intended. But I mean, he would love that, I think. But anything we could do to help you, to empower you more, and to further your story, because I think it's just terrific. And as somebody who's approaching 70, it's very, very viable for me, and I'm very, very glad to hear it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tim?
Michelle, thank you very much. And to echo much of what Chris has said, I think in terms of being able to get this service up and running in the time and with the impact that you have over the period has been extraordinary. And I'm not to hark on about it, but Rewoman's been with us for getting on for 2 decades as a concept and as a service. And I think that to actually have that here now is really important, and also to go the next step and something which I've asked about a number of times, which is the pickup service. You know, again, is really great, and to echo the words about stepping up and ensuring that people don't get to need hospital services in that sense is really important. We may have a slight disagreement about patients and people. But that's what you would expect, that tension shows itself across the board as well as in practice. And I think it really is important to recognise that, because if you don't recognise one side or the other, then I think that's where the problems and the issues arise. So I think that's really helpful. And also just to comment on the money and the cash out. I think all the research shows that in terms of the people who use the services, how much they value that and the impact it has on their quality of life. And I think that's really important, and those things are really hard to put a pound symbol against. I just had just a couple of specific questions in terms of referrals from GPs and hubs, and how important that is in terms of identifying people who might not be identified elsewhere within the community. About weekend referrals, and how people access the service at weekends. And also just wondering about, because in other places there will be residential reablement services, and those kind of things come and go, but I just wondered whether you felt there was a lack of that, or whether that's something which community-based residential reablement services, or maybe I've missed that there are in fact those kind of services available. So just a brilliant and really great to hear what's going on. And also, I know that they're really scarce, but really good to see that OTs are involved, because I think, again, the research shows that reablement services, really OTs are at the heart of that, and their experience and skills that they bring to reablement just can't be done by any other group. So really good to hear that. Thank you, Michelle.
And also our OTs and physios are quite, I call, interprofessional. So actually they go, so it might be a physio that's going out to actually do the initial assessment, but they're not going to shy away from actually what might they need around the toilet. Just in the same way as our OTs won't go, I'm not touching that because of the mobility problem. So we work very interprofessionally from that point of view and offer a holistic assessment at the point of delivery. So in regards to the residential side, so we are picking up service users now who might wish to come out from residential, but I think there is still there isn't as much that goes on within residential unless they're identified as potentially then looking at going home.
Because we know once you're in residential care for 6 weeks, then that's it.
Yeah.
So that's really important to again, if people have been admitted into residential placements, make sure that the reablement bit there is available for them to get them out as soon as possible, just like an inpatient ward.
Yeah, and that's the other reason why we're picking up the non-weight bearing pathway as well, because people were then just sitting in residential homes or nursing homes for a lot longer than they needed to, and you know, with a false interpretation, I think that non-weight bearing means non-rehabable, and that's not the case.
Oh, thanks, Michelle. Just want to go back to what you were saying about the interdisciplinary nature of your team, and I just wondered if the team that you've got now and the plans for your team expansion are based on a particular model, or is it more you started with who you had and you build it from there?
So quite a lot. So the team that started off for reablement was the support workers, a couple of OTs, and a service manager. So that's the team, and they only took referrals between Monday and Thursday, and they only took referrals between 9 and 4. So it's been a massive shift for that team, and they have done so well to adjust to that. They're now doing shift work, they're working weekends. You know, we have a duty roster from 8 till 8, and our ACPs, our referrals finish at 8 o'clock, but the ACPs will then stay till 10 if required to do so because if there's a referral that comes in at 8, then they still have to respond to that. So some of the modelling was done around the national audit work that goes on for intermediate care. So, and also the whole, so we were very lucky because we weren't setting up services to match pots of money, which is what they've done in the UK. So here you are, there's a pot of money for crisis response, set that up. Here's the pot of money for reablement, set that up. Here's a pot of money for facilitated discharge. And actually, if you look at the national audit information now, they actually audit you on how integrated your services now are. So we're like, let's forget all those pots and we'll just make an intermediate care service. And so the intermediate care service covers all of those aspects. So we took some of that modelling from national audit as to when they break it down as to per 100,000 population, how many OTs might you need, how many, you know, so it's based on some of that national audit data, plus then going and begging and borrowing and stealing from other organisations.
And how are we doing against those benchmarks?
So we've actually just got, we're just starting now from April, that we're now part of the national audit data group. And it's not just intermediate care, it covers a wide range of things that you can actually get access into that now, including virtual wards at some point, and there's community services within that. But Manx Care has you know, I've been very lucky that they funded us to go be part of the national audit framework. So we're just starting that, develop with the BI team what we need to be collecting and where we can collect that information from, so that we'll be able to report in for the 2026 audit.
Well, that's a really good note to end on, Michelle. I think we can all talk to you all day. It's absolutely brilliant work. It seems to me it's truly about integration. It will really hit the nail on the head at CQC. I'm also delighted that we're looking outwards, not inwards, and being part of the national audit approach is really important. My friend and colleague, Sir Steve, is really interested in virtual awards, so if you want to visit from him, we'll bring him over.
Yeah.
But I do think that this is about the best care for people in the Isle of Man, and we know that they say they want to stay home or close to home. So this is a huge step forward. I reiterate, this is a magnificent achievement a year. Just shows what we can do. And I think we certainly want to get this data in front of ministers and the department and just show what we can do.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. Really well received. And please thank your team on behalf of the board.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Don't see how many referrals are pinged in. I have to leave my bag out there because otherwise it'd be pinging at me. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So thank you. I just want to make a comment to Elaine and co. I think the quality of the presentations over the last few months at this section of the board have been really great. It's really good to hear from services that you don't have a particular profile, but the fact that they're bringing their data now, as we heard last time, it's really, really helpful. It's where we need to punch, particularly in public meetings. So thank you. Moving on to, is Paul here? If he's not, we can do something else.
Yeah.
Oh, is that okay? Thank you. Good. Welcome, Paul.
Hello, Chair. How are you?
Good, thank you. You're clearly not in the best of condition. What have we done to you? Your ankle.
It's actually a fractured talus, but it's getting better.
Okay, well, you must stop kicking doors at Mr. Edge. So I'm delighted to welcome you to our Board Assurance Framework section. This is a really key component as we go forward. I've got some comments to make about how we take this on board, but I'll hand over to you for this section. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for inviting me today as well to talk about this. It was actually an exciting assurance development. Assurance is a cornerstone of governance, risk and compliance, and the Board Assurance Framework is actually the joining up of assurance against risk, and it's those risks that affect the strategic objectives. It's not a criticism of the previous Board Assurance Framework, it's actually streamlining it, it's enabling assurance reporting to be made clear, with clear accountability for the board to make informed decisions. So from floor to board with the risk, and board to floor with the accountability and the assurance. It's something I'm very passionate about, and I work very closely with the board secretary. And it's to enable the board that informed decision making, but also to see what strategic threats threaten Manx Care's strategic objectives, Chair.
Okay, so thank you. So are there any comments on the Board Assurance Framework that's attached in the minutes? Because I've got a few. Should I kick off, since this is my, at the moment, favourite subject? So I really like the detail, and I recognise that the detail is important, but I think we need a more succinct sort of top-level risk assessment that the board can easily see. I'm also used to a framework where you see the mitigations against the risk written down, and I'm very keen, following a meeting we had last week that Teresa and I were in, that this is something our department colleagues and our ministers can understand. And therefore, I would like to see our risks and our framework aligned with the mandate and the operating plan, so that number 5 corresponds to everything across all of those. I'm not sure that's possible, but I've confidently said that we'll do it. So I'm going to ask you to help me with that, Paul. I do think that the way in which it's laid out is really, really helpful. What I'm not sure, and I welcome people's advice, is in terms of the public, what it's telling them about our risks. And I know how long it took me to understand risk and assurance and mitigation in this space. But I do wonder whether we ought to, for the boards in public, have a summary of, whether that risk is going up or down. And if I perhaps give an example, I sit on another board in England, and we reduced our workforce risks down quite significantly, even though we're about to face significant reductions from the centre, because you can't have a risk that stays high and can't go any higher. You've got to have an understanding of the context of risk, which is the wider system. So those are my comments, but I do pay tribute to the team, because I think it's come on a huge amount. And I know that it's quite a new concept for many of the people. And I also thank the teams that have contributed to this, because you can't do your work without their work. So those are my comments. Any other comments from people around this? Tim, then Tim.
Just to say, as you would expect, that the QSC, the committee that I chair, has been looking at this as well, and has been working on the two risk areas. And I would assume over the next few months, the details will change and the format will change. I think you're absolutely right. I think that we have to be clear about the purpose of this and the different audiences.
Yeah.
So that it's clear. I think it's come on a huge amount. It's been really helpful through the committee as well. But I think it's a continuing task.
Thank you. Just on the committees, I'll chip in now. I was going to ask that each of the committees holds a board assurance framework workshop to refine their bits and to actually change them and to say this doesn't work for us, this does. And perhaps Paul, if you could attend those, that would be really helpful. Because I think you were getting used to it. You will have some real views about, well, that's not actually telling us what the risk is or assuring us. So I think we're probably at the stage where we ought to start planning some time as individual board committees to look at their own space and say, well, and then there'll be the gap analysis that we'll need to do.
And by pure coincidence, unrehearsed, the QSC has put in my diaries to spend some specific time outside the committee meeting.
Yeah,
to discuss our strategic plan, but also how we use the BAF to drive our business.
And that's precisely the story that we are developing with our department colleagues as they get into their governance space. This is a document that will have to always be outward facing. And it's not one that you can fudge, and nor do we want to. But I would like to see the mitigations in there, because I think that gives the sort of public, oh, that's what's happening. That's helpful. So Elaine, if perhaps you can take that away for the other committees, and Tim's off the blocks quickly, but that will be really helpful if we can see that that's happening. Other Tim's route. Tim O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I agree. I love the simplicity. I mean, Paul, you know that already, so that's absolutely right. And the research around the relationship between complexity and how well colleagues actually take information in is well established, so that's great. I really like the Chair's point around mitigation. It's something we're not great at sometimes across the organisation. We're very good at describing the risk. And
I disagree. I think we're really good at the mitigation. I just don't think we talk about it.
I mean, in terms of what we described.
Yes, exactly.
So that's the key bit. So it's your point around assurance is that, the wide stakeholder group will struggle to be assured if we don't describe that mitigation. We're going to get better at. So yeah, very, very keen to work with on this moving forward.
Sheila?
Thank you, Chairman. And Paul and I have done quite a lot of work here, and Elaine, because this, as you say, Wendy, is just so important. We can't do other governance without the board assurance framework. I liked some of the examples. I've asked MIAAs separately for further examples, because they've travelled the country of the UK doing this, to help us to get that right. And I've got some good stuff around cycle of business, particularly for QSE. But whatever way we do it, you're right, it needs to tell an internal, external partnership story on a page. And I think the initial one that you did for fire safety there has got the bones of that. And I think with a little bit of a tweak around it, we'll be able to tell that story, because I think that's really good for a starter for 10. I asked Wendy, if I hope you don't mind, but I did a link to QSE for Louise to give us just a little bit more.
Yes.
Give us more really good examples.
I also think that they're very willing to help challenge and support us in this space. I mean, that's part of the governance review deal that we made with them. And I don't underestimate the complexities. And I have seen quite experienced board assurance frameworks with a sort of query, because they know there's something to put in there. They haven't quite worked out how to do it. And I think that level of transparency with the public, yeah, it's not that you're not having a conversation about it, it's that you're framing that. We have committed to this as a board. You have our support for it. I do think it's something that, as individual non-executives, it does take a while to get your head around this. So I think we as a board will speak up if we need help. But Paul, if you could support those workshops at each of the subcommittees. And then I think we are planning, I think we were talking about a board development day in September, when we want to sort of really take a view as the whole board around our assurance processes, which will fit, I think, with the modern health government as well.
Sorry, I was still going to. No, it's fine. No, it's not. I was just going to add that in terms of that piece with the department, and in order to not keep duplicating work, let's do a good piece of work, do it once and use it, and for our assurance purposes with the department.
Yeah.
One of the things, and we've touched upon it, is making sure that our mandate objectives map absolutely to the back and absolutely to the front sheet. So we are really sure what each of our subcommittees is taking the assurance on, and it's prompting those in the subcommittee to ensure our papers are tailored to provide that level of assurance, which means that we can then send that information up to the department. And in theory, we're doing part of their job for them. But that's the bill we also need to have ourselves. You know, we have the assurance first, and then we're able to put the assurance up to the department. And I know Elaine and Paul have already started that mapping of all of those mandate objectives into the back and the front sheet.
That's really great. And that's a conversation that, again, will join us with colleagues in the department who ask different questions, and we will get better at this with those external questions. Anything to add, Tim?
I was just going to say, just wanted to be absolutely clear that the clinical leads and professional leads who attend the committees are absolutely key in this, and to be clear that the QSE wouldn't be anywhere where it is now without Sheila's input, and I'll say we have a meeting arranged already. It's not because of me. It's because of the professional and the clinical leads who are in that committee. So just wanted to for that, but yes, okay. So just want to make that clear.
I think,
and how that's
so I think
across all
the other point actually that perhaps this is a board in public. I think we ought to make the point that all of this is underpinned by our clinical leadership framework. So just thinking about the matrons yesterday, thinking about some clinical leadership for intermediate care. This is their assurance as well, and their faith in us as a board that we hear them. So we should be able to follow something right the way down to that bedside. And I went to a seminar, I think it was probably organised by NHS providers, it's a long while ago, which was BAF to bedside. And that was a really interesting idea. And it is about us opening the doors of the board to think about the reality of what it means to be cared for in Mexico. So Paul, thank you. Busy time. And everyone will always want things done. But I would like to see us at the stage where by our sort of September meeting, each of the subcommittees is a bit more confident around their own BAF areas, and that we started to refine the BAF report for the board as a shorter summary with the trajectories projected, so that BAF can also look forward as well. So thank you. That will be my sort of timing if no one's looking too horrified at that. That's really helpful. But thank you. This is a massive. I mean, given where we started, this is a huge amount of work. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you for your kind feedback. I'll leave you on good assurance, if you don't mind. I have already mapped strategically, and I'll pass it up to the board, every objective from the Monday through to the operating plan and deliverables.
It's always one thing.
But that's great, Paul, because I think, we've got a board to board tomorrow, so we can assure the department. I've already asked Elaine to reach out to Sam Macaulay to sort of send her the BAF just so she gets her head around the scale of it. And I would perhaps ask you and Elaine to sit down with Sam and her team and just walk them through this, because we make assumptions about other people's understanding of our business at our peril. And your ability to capture this on a short side of paper is great, and we should be sharing that. So thank you. Charlie, sorry you want to come in. I missed you. Sorry,
Thank
Charlie.
you, Chair. It's okay, just very brief. First of all, I really like the way the risk is profiled. It's basically a plan on one page. And I like the fact that my eyes can see all facets of that risk, but I do agree the mitigations are an important aspect of it. We're all going to be learning how to read this and interpret it in a different way to what we're used to. I'm really keen for people outside of the kind of healthcare professional system to also understand it. So I just wondered if a suggestion around either having a brief session or creating a very brief user guide just to familiarise ourselves with what we're looking at, but importantly, getting us all on the same page with how we're interpreting the information that you're sharing with us. So I just wanted to highlight the importance of making sure we're all interpreting what you're saying correctly. And perhaps, like I said, a short user guide or a navigation piece of work to help us identify what we're looking at and what it means, I think would be quite a helpful piece to go alongside this.
I think that's helpful, Charlie. If you remember the very first non-executive discussion we had about risk, it was quite an interesting variation there. But there were some guidance slides in that pack that I think if we make sure you've seen them, Paul, if they fit, then we could just perhaps summarise and remind people of where we're pitching ourselves. And that's the culture of a board. And you will have, it's a bit like the hawks and doves conversation, you'll have variation in that. But that's the point of the board, is that variation is captured and agreed at a fixed point in time as we move through the months. So that's really helpful. Okay, well done. Thank you very much. I hope your Taylor's heels, not a nice injury. But yes, don't kick any more doors, Paul.
I'll try not to. Thank you very much, Chair.
All over any acorns.
So moving on to my report, I'll be very brief. So busy month or two, including the holiday break. I'm very pleased that our non-executive appointment, Fiona Hatton, has been approved. Slightly tortuous process, but grateful for Department of Health for their support, and indeed to the Chief Officer of Timors, Mark Lewin. Fiona will be joining us on June the 1st. I could ask her to come and see you first, Helen. She's an Islander. She's young and dynamic, and I've asked her for a summary CV, which will circulate as soon as we get it. In terms of on-island mentoring, we've got Nigel, but I've also asked Sandra to take her under her wing and make sure that she's sort of one of us as soon as she can be. Her background is in charities, both global and in the UK. She's worked at ministerial level. She's a very impressive young woman, but she's absolutely committed to public service on the Isle of Man. Also, we feel very lucky to have them. We'll also be proceeding to advertise for 2 further non-executive vacancies, which will complete our cohort. And I'm very grateful to both Katie Kapanos and Kate Lancaster, who are finishing around now, for all of their service to the board, but also to their personal support and advice when I joined the board, and to a very large amount of coffee that I've had with Kate Lancaster over the months. They are both examples of true public servants, and we've been very lucky to have them. But as we build for the future, one of the conversations I've had with colleagues is how we succession plan in the non-executive space. And we will be discussing the detail of what we want from these 2 new posts over the next week or 2. I think I'm not sure when the advert's going out, but I will check and we'll make sure that's in the minutes. I have had several meetings with the new incumbents in government, so particularly with Mark Lewis and with Scott Galler, who's just taken over as the interim Department of Health Chief Officer. And I've had a number of ministerial meetings around assurance, one with the Department of Health team and two with the Minister herself. And I think what's really exciting is that we're all in this improve the governance space, which is perfect timing for us. So our governance review has really opened up that conversation. As I reported at the last board in public, Timwell questions had led to the what are we going to do about the governance of Department of Health, Manx Care and Treasury. That is now at a stage where the governance review will be led by the department for the department, and that's really helpful, and we will be key stakeholders in that. We're still awaiting the terms of reference, but I suspect now that Scott's we'll get them very soon because he's only just started. But I would encourage our board to be outward facing and really positive about this. It's a really good opportunity to reduce duplication, improve communication, and actually serve the public more effectively. I've also been to a meeting in the UK around further upcoming NICE guidance and standards, which is very interesting. Once that is formalised, NICE will be issuing its annual update, and we will be looking at what that impact has for Manx Care. And yesterday, I had the great privilege of walking into Nobles and seeing a large number of people in red downstairs. I didn't get given any sweets, but it was International Day of the Nurse. And the majority of healthcare staff are nurses. And Sheila took the opportunity of launching our matron structure. It's really good that the minister came, and I'd like to minute my thanks to Claire. She is incredibly supportive at times like this. It's really great that she puts herself out and gets over and meets people. She talked to all of our matrons individually. She asked really important questions. And what came over was a really enthusiastic bunch of staff. I think it's really important to say in public that this is cost neutral. These are not new jobs. These are repurposing of individuals in a structure, clinical leadership that will improve care. And I'm very grateful for all the work that's been done there. It was a really nice way to start my week. So thank you very much to everyone. Any questions on what I've been up to? Thank you. Teresa, let's report.
Thank you. Just a few things to pull out and share with the board. Just wanted to provide a further update on breast services. This has been an incredibly challenging period of time. We see challenges around recruiting a breast radiologist, a second breast radiologist into the service. But really pleased to report that position has now stabilised. We do have a locum who commenced with us in April, and we have recruited substantively to the consultant breast radiologist post, and that successful candidate joins us formally in August. So that is really positive news. Obviously, we are coming up to TT. And there has been a huge amount of effort, as there always is, in preparing for the increased number of visitors that we receive to the island and for the racing event itself. So the operational plans are all being signed off. We are prepared, and as Michelle highlighted in her presentation, we will lead into the TT event with a multi-agency discharge event, that main event, which we have run two previous events. Both have been incredibly successful, one in advance of the 4-day Easter break and one in January, just to be able to make sure all our systems and processes are tested and we are discharging patients appropriately from hospital care into the community in order to give us the capacity we need to run safely during TT. I wanted just to recognise a few things from the Horizon scan because some very positive work, as well as being International Day of the Nurse yesterday and the launch of our senior matrons. It is also Foster Carer fortnight running from the 12th to the 25th. And I know Tim and Julie, there's a huge number of events going on over that 2-week period in recognition of that really important work. And also the report, the Horizon scan, also signals that we're just in the process of updating the fostering, retention and recruitment strategy, which again, building on the success that team have had. And I think we've got to reflect where we were with fostering a couple of years ago and how it is very, very different now to what it was just a couple of years ago. We have full teams in place and we have achieved great success in that service with some very hard work from the team, but some very strong support from the Mayor of Douglas in Ireland, who's personally championed that agenda. Also, let's just pull out that we ran Falls Awareness Week, again led by Sheila and Chris, in terms of that piece of work which absolutely starts to look at how we train our workforce in falls awareness. A whole series of events during the course of the week. The Health and Safety Executive come and join us for some of those training sessions, and during the course of that week, 426 people were trained in falls awareness and falls prevention. And I know that has been on the agenda for the Quality, Safety and Engagement Committee frequently. In terms of waiting times reductions, the psychological therapy service reporting some very good outcomes in terms of the waiting time reduction. 89% of referrals now waiting less than 18 weeks for first treatment and appointments, and that continued commitment. And my report talks about the very innovative work we're doing with the military in terms of offering those placements for military trained paramedics to come across to the island and spend a couple of years with us, really developing their skills and giving them all the skills. We see that as being incredibly successful. It's already having a really positive impact. It is a win-win for Manx Care because we pay a fraction of what we would ordinarily pay, and the military get the training. We will look to expand that, but also in the report, I just want to signal the continued excellent work of Kildare in looking for those on-island training opportunities. So as well as doubling the number of pre-registration nurse trainings and looking at lots of other training programs, we are hopeful about bringing occupational therapy degrees to the island. And again, that will all help our recruitment and retention. So those are just a few highlights from my report that I just wanted to flag. But I think it's very positive news and very positive assurance that we can finally talk about a substantive breast radiologist joining Manx Care after a gap of what will be almost 18 months. Thank you.
That's really helpful. Any comments or questions for Teresa? No, thank you very much. Really helpful information. So operating plan and mandate update. I think you're taking this because Sean's on leave.
Yes, Sean is on leave. Yes, I mean, Sean has prepared this report. I mean, obviously, we are now live into the delivery of the operating plan for 25-26 in response to the mandate. Everybody will be aware of the very extensive debate that there was in Timor over the two documents. We obviously are committed to delivering everything we have said and providing a real clear governance structure from which we can evidence and provide assurance of the delivery for the mandate. We know we go into the financial year with some challenges. We know our CIP programme is reported at £14.9 million, and we're still working through the detail of the delivery of that. But actually, we are very, very committed to transforming those models of care. So that real focus on care in the community, ensuring that our locality hubs are doing the work that needs to do, the virtual ward, the great work in intermediate care, the real focus on home first. So that is progressing quite well. That focus around relationships with off-island care, so getting the contractual framework for those services robust with good contract monitoring, and looking at those opportunities to repatriate work to the island where it's safe and appropriate to do so. And you can see in the horizon scan where there has already been some initial work to consider repatriating work back to the island. Myself or Oliver has led those meetings with the tertiary providers. And I think one of the things which I think is important to say, because actually, and we will need to communicate this more broadly when we understand the full details, but NHS England are also taking money out of elective care. And so the reality is England is also likely to see waiting times for elective care grow in response to reducing the funding available. Providers are currently working through what they think that will mean for them, and we need to understand again what that will mean to us, because all of our patients are clinically validated and assessed, and are not taken out of time order against wider NHS patients, nor should they be. But obviously we will need to understand the impact of that. Following the exec team decision, which I reported to the last board about dental services, those contract discussions with dentists about the increase in the UDA value have started to happen. I think they have gone quite well. They will need to progress, but I think that is our opportunity to attempt to get the delivery of dental activity in line with the contracts and also have some impact on the waiting times for dental services and the allocation. The leadership and the governance arrangements underpinning the mandate delivery are now in place. So we have revised internally the performance and accountability frameworks in order to make sure they are sufficiently focused on mandate delivery and the finances. But we don't want to create a separate governance structure. We want this to fit within our existing governance framework, using the executive team and obviously using the reporting to the board and the subcommittees. So I think what I want to assure the board on is that we are absolutely, with the support of the improvement directors, driving this change and this transition and the implementation of this new operating plan. Thanks.
Thank you. Really comprehensive, and minute our thanks to Sean. I would like to see a timeline against performance so that we know that in July we will see this element of the target achieved. I think that sort of trajectory mapping is really helpful. We've got quite specific targets. I think there's still some perhaps descriptive, existential things in the mandate that are hard to measure. And I know that you've had conversations with the exec team about what that actually means. So particularly the sort of shift to care and home primary care. I would politely suggest that we do the easy ones, the targets, the numerical targets. We've got a timescale for that, and that's really visible. And then we have a conversation at perhaps the board to board about how do they want to hear about this, and where do we sit on that. So I think that framework is really helpful. And I'm conscious that sometimes we're so busy delivering the operating plan that we forget to actually say, well, actually, we've counted that. And my anxiety is twofold. One is undershooting. And, we're not going to achieve our target, but it's only 3 months before year end, and we're that mess that I don't want to get into, which I don't think we will. But also overshooting, doing more than we can legitimately justify within the commission that we've got. And that's a really awful space to be in as a clinician, because so managing that and those expectations for our clinicians is really important. So I'd like to see some timelines against that. And I think the only other thing from the operating plan is that the responsibility obviously sits with an individual exec level. I think we'd like assurance right down at that clinical directorate division of have we got clinicians on board with all of this, and that's the sort of risk analysis. Where do we as a board need to help our exec colleagues focus their energy. And sometimes that can be supportive, sometimes it can be challenging, but what can we do to help you get to those clinicians that are struggling with their bit of the operating plan, and what's the help that you need? And I would like to, we're in quarter one, so perhaps at the end of quarter one, if we can have that discussion about where we are at July board, perhaps we can spare a bit more time for that, that sort of integrated performance approach. Are the execs happy with that? And will that help the non-execs get our head around this? Because if you look back to last year, we knew where we were financially around September, October time. But it's quite late then to really motor on new things, new ideas. And we did, we've got there, thank you. But I do think that we can be a little bit more proactive this time. So I think the end of quarter one is a really important waypoint for us.
Yeah.
Is everyone happy with that? But thank you. This is really impressive work. Thank you. Then on to the exception reports, which will of course be part of a BAF framework and won't be separate in months to come. There is no exception from D&I. I think from the People Committee, as Sarah's not here, the pay awards was raised as a potential issue. I don't think any update on that. Benefit of the board, it's just we know that it's a risk we've flagged in terms of performance.
Yeah, we've obviously made an offer. Those offers haven't been accepted. We have now recognised the escalation in those, which was anticipated. Yeah.
Good, thank you. And in terms of the English aspect of this, the NMC conference was somewhat depressing this week, wasn't it, in terms of the potential for strike action in the summer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
We just have to monitor that. And again, I think it's the sort of conversation, Sheila, if you could have with department colleagues, just that if it's not on their radar, it should be. It's a risk. Okay, QSC, Tim, any exception reports?
No, nothing to alert the board to. And the board as it is, and we touched on what I might have said earlier on.
Yeah, thank you. And then PNC was yesterday, I understand, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yes, it was. I'm sorry about that. Wendy, normally reach one PNC, a week in advance of completion boots. Yeah. Do you want me to cover off a?
Yeah, if there's anything that isn't on the agenda later, in terms of the management accounts.
Yeah, I think. Well, the good news is that we're ending the year where we thought we were going to end the year, so that's cold comfort, but it's good news.
Yeah, no, it's more than half of last year's deficit.
Yeah.
So I consider that an achievement. It's not where we wanted to be as a board, but it is significantly better.
Yeah, there's some challenges on the horizon. There's some challenges on the horizon, of course, for this year, as you would expect them to be. I think around the cost improvement plan for 25-26, we're cited on that. But I think some good work emerged in that. I think there's some discussions to be had around opportunity that might still exist around the CIP, but also in the way in which budgets are discussed and agreed. And I think teasing that out at yesterday's meeting was very helpful, because budgets are still a difficult area, particularly with the care group leaders. And I think there's some anecdotal evidence that perhaps we can be more collegiate in the way in which those budgets are agreed, rather than put to care groups. Sounds like a negative, but actually I think it's very good news to get it on the table.
No, I think it's a lot to ask, and I think it's the places that committee, so that's really helpful.
Yeah, some really, really good work having been delivered around management of our contractual frameworks, particularly in the area of tertiary care. There was, a demonstration of real grip being exerted. It's not there yet, but it's much, much better than it is. It's a step job. And also, emerging discussions with primary care providers in terms of GPs and dentists. Again, it's a big job, but I think there's some real positives coming out of that. The dialogue is positive.
That's really helpful, and thank you very much, Nigel. That's great. And anything from audit, which was I think May the 7th.
Charlie chaired audit. For me
Charlie,
because I was
audit. Thank you, Charlie. Any exception reports from audit?
There's nothing to report as an exception or any kind of red flags, but I just wanted to highlight how beneficial having the individual care groups in to present their current audits and provide us with assurance of what's happening, but also how they plan and how they develop those plans as well. And it's been beneficial to have two care groups in the room at the same time, one which is more advanced or mature in its audit activity and infrastructure, and one that's still learning, because what we're now starting to see within that committee is helping of each other. So we're highlighting areas of good practice, we're finding out who needs help, and we're connecting them together. And so I really do have some high hopes that through this system of having them in to discuss what they're planning and what they're doing, we're starting to share that best practice. So that it was quite revealing having two presentations in the meeting. And yeah, I'm going to champion that moving forward. But we received good assurance that plans are on track.
Really helpful. Thanks, Charlie. Any comments on any of the committees? No, thank you. So CQC update. Sheila?
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. So this is the annual closeout and transition report. So this is, we've already taken this to QSE. So just a little bit of background that we had over 100 reports from the CQC a couple of years ago, and we motored ahead and was able to do so many, but there were other ones that were stuck on red because we needed our partners to work with us. So we spoke to our partners, and we set up a quality and assurance framework meeting with the Department of Health. That has gone from strength to strength. We now have the Department of Infrastructure around the table with us, and we're soon to have the shared service for HR around the table with us. People are working really well together, and relationships are really good. So whilst we've been doing that, the focus has been on the CQC, although we've moved on to other things that are important. But just going back to CQC, fair to say that when CQC came in and provided action plans, the world has moved on as well. So the result is we've got to a point now where we feel confident, and we've been able to deliver the assurance to QSE that we haven't dropped any of those actions along the line, and we've held them. But we've moved things into business as usual. And the result of that, Chair, is most of those red actions are complete. So we started with 48%, and now that's at 3%. So it's just to assure the board that we've got confidence that it has moved into the business as usual space. Most of the conversations out of interest have been indeed around dental, which is really, really important, as we mentioned previously in the board. But we've got the right people around the table talking about that. But I think really importantly, we've got a really good meeting with colleagues there. So much so from the Department of Infrastructure and all that goes with the state, we're sharing risk registers. And Paul Edge has been supporting the Department of Infrastructure with the work we've been doing through MIAA. So although not necessarily our role, really important to share that expertise across to enable us to deliver on things such as CQC. Yes. So we're keeping those meetings at the moment, Chair, if we may.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I will be supportive of keeping them, maybe not as frequent as you had to have them, but I think, there will be another CQC visit. It's not something that I've had a chance to discuss with the Minister, but I do think it's something that perhaps we ought to start thinking about. It's really useful waypoint for people. Perhaps when our clinical structures settled a bit, we should be inviting them in.
We've had discussions with the department through all of this, and the department are creating their own structure for inspection based on CQC principles. I know they've had consultation with the public on that. So I've asked for them to bring to the next meeting what that is going forward, which they're bringing to our July meeting.
Okay. I thought this, what I think is irrelevant. Right, excellent. Well, we will make that. Tim,
You happy with that, Chair?
Tim.
We had a bit of that discussion with the QSC, and I think we reflected that external assurance was like gold dust and was really useful to have external assurance. We also noted there were other inspectorates. In other words, the versions, obviously the Scottish and the Welsh inspectorates. And I think the reflection was that it would be really good learning experience, and that were we to have an external inspectorate come again, the planning of that inspection or those inspections would be absolutely fundamental to getting a really good product in terms of the outcome. Not so good inspection, but a good product for learning and developing the service.
Yes, thank you, Sheila.
I just go in. We would never do what we've done again on Ireland in terms of CQC. It was probably something we decided to do at that point. I think in fairness to the department, they are looking at the inspection thoroughly. We have had conversations about doing in-depth inspections, maybe 5 yearly, working with other islands as well. But it's very much in draft, and so I've requested could they share with us what they've got so far. So that will, and our meetings that we created off the back of the CQC, we've agreed bi-monthly already. So, but they've been really useful, Chair, in terms of.
No, I agree. I think this is massive progress. Thank you, because we were anxious about that as a board. So thank you for the progress. I know that you'll have looked at the 3% that's remaining red. That's helpful. But I think this is about understanding what underpins these comments, and CQC, to be fair to them, they gave a very narrative report. But this is a really helpful way of seeing it displayed for the board. So please thank the teams that have been in this, and thank you for getting the budget to the room. I think the board will await with interest the regulatory regime from the department. But anyway, we can see. And moving on to another regulatory issue, Ofsted, the update. So this is heard by Julie. Give me, Tim, you're taking this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just 3 quick points. So we've landed the business use arrangements with the department, as you can see on the front page of the report in terms of oversight and monitoring. That's taken a few months to work through. Both sides are comfortable with the arrangement now, and that's working well from my perspective. The critical factor underneath that second point is that we're now linking our regular audit activity into individual actions, so we can be as precise as possible about those areas that we have demonstrated we've progressed on, but we want to make sure we're continuing that progress over the longer term. And that links to further assurance to our safeguarding board and ensuring that safeguarding board, who are obviously a bit more distant from the detail, can have the assurance they need. The progress is maintained and accelerated as we go through. So good progress overall. The final point I would make on the second page of the report, there's a list of things that we're working together with on the department that are either more complex or longer term action sets. Just to note that some of those are starting to move forward now. So we've had some progress on the corporate parenting board action in recent weeks, which we'll be able to report back on once that's up and running. But some good progress.
So I was just interested in the workforce strategy there, as to whose workforce and who owns it, and what's the strategic intention of a workforce strategy?
Yeah, I think we want to work really closely with Helen, because some of the bigger issues are around retaining talent and recruiting the right quality, for example, of social workers and keeping them. Some of the minutiae I won't go into now around the packages that we can offer to support social workers when they come in. So there's a lot of detail in that. We're making some progress, but I think I'd certainly like to see that accelerate, working with Locate Isle of Man, for example, to bring forward a more holistic approach towards supporting and retaining talent.
I think, can we have an approach from someone about we can help you recruit nurses? I seem to remember getting random. I'll check my random email box and find it, because I think it was something at the time I couldn't. There wasn't a role for it, but there are groups that are really interested in supporting Manx care recruiting. Charities, they want to help and support it. So we work to try and get in. that would be helpful.
So we've had a number of conversations already, Sheila. I don't know if you want to take this because we spoke about the talent pool, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yes. So we spoke to the Department of Enterprise, and that was off the back of accommodation for people to be able to stay here. But they have a talent pool, which we put our hands up, we don't really know very much about. And we were talking about how we recruit and improve that recruitment, because they're picking up applications and putting, it's not just nurses, is it?
No, it's all kind of
across the board. And those people are sitting in this talent pool. I've invited them with Helen to come in and talk to us about that, Tim. So
Very good,
we can have one system,
Yeah.
the whole island.
That's really sensible. And I think the matrons and demonstration of career progression in nursing that wasn't there,
Yeah.
there'll be something similar in social care. So I think the board's, as part of our strategic responsibilities, and I hesitate to say we want a strategic workforce plan because that was my previous life and I'm not going there again. But I
And that
do
was a
think
quick fix, wasn't it?
long-term plan is marvellous. But I do think that we have a responsibility to the public to, first of all, employ them and train them and give them a decent life in public sector, but also to, what's the apprenticeship role? There's all sorts of things like that. I really would welcome a sort of deep dive into that at some stage. Perhaps.
And just to finish, it's important to say that both children and adults workforce, I've made this point previously, we have made some really good progress in the last financial year. So we're starting from a better baseline than we were.
Okay, that's really helpful. So thank you. Any other questions? Sorry, Tim.
So I don't want to prolong that discussion. Just two things to say. One is this has been to QSC as well, and we've reviewed a more detailed report, and Julie came to present the report, which is really helpful. So I'm happy with that. And then just to, I know when we talk about workforce, I just see care leaders here as well, and just thinking about that unique position where we're in, where we have people who are leading. Responsibility for in terms of having been corporate parents of some kind and moving them into apprenticeships, further learning, or becoming our employees. It's just really important.
When we were children,
talking about that, Tammy,
Brilliant.
Yeah.
It's a really great thing to do, and you get so much back from them as well. So I would really promote that. Be really helpful. But anything I can do to help in my previous hat on, very helpful.
We've also got a bunch of young adults who are part of our learning disability service at the moment, who also we're exploring ways that we can link them into employment, and so it's a big piece. And I suppose the thing that I'm mindful of is that it, quite rightly, we have a significant focus on early careers. But as an organisation, in terms of our workforce plan, we can't just have early careers professionals in our workforce. So it's about how do we manage that balance carefully.
Really interesting. No, thank you. And again, excellent to see you coming through that, Ruth. Thank you. So moving on to patient-initiated follow-up. So the outpatient improvement programme updates.
Yeah, thanks. Apologies that this is a bit of a dry paper. I thought it would be good to give an overview on the basis that the action was around talking about patient-initiated follow-up, but giving a slightly wider view of what we're up to in 3 specific parts of the outpatient improvement programme. So there's 15 separate work streams in the outpatient improvement programme, everything from patient communications, reducing DNAs, improving clinic utilisation, etc. But the 3 areas I just wanted to focus on: digitisation, patient-initiated follow-up, and also the waiting list validation. So digitisation is a project that we've had ongoing for around 9 months now, and it seeks to move a lot of the patient admin or clinic admin from very paper-based systems to IT-based systems, using the functionality on our patient administration system, which is called CareFlow. So we've been predominantly looking at implementing both the e-triage and also the e-outcome functionality. So e-triage being the ability for a consultant to triage a referral coming in through the care flow system rather than receiving the letter on his or her desk and writing the triage note on it and then sending it back. So that pilot has happened in a number of areas, paediatrics, respiratory, breast, and is underway within a number of other areas at the moment. All reporting really positive outcomes, both in terms of turnaround of referrals, so the time between receiving the referral and it being triaged, and also just general staff feedback. Consultants, whilst initially were a bit sceptical about the system, actually reporting really positive. Similarly, introducing the e-outcome functionality. So once a consultant or a doctor or any healthcare professional has seen a patient in a clinic, rather than filling out an outcome form and that going to the patient information centre, that outcome is actually directly recorded on the care flow system. Means that whatever the next step of their care, whether that's a test to be ordered, whether that's another appointment to be issued, whether that's addition to the waiting list, etc., all of that can happen much quicker compared to the previous process, which is the outcome sheet being filled out, returned to the patient information centre, and then that being processed manually. So again, it reduces the admin duplication as well as improving the speed of response between different stages of the outpatient process. So as I say, that is a piece of work that is ongoing. So we're hoping to have that full functionality rolled out by the end of the calendar year.
So can we just pause at that one?
Yes.
These are separate issues, aren't they? So I think this is really important and it's really great, but I'm not sure that we can have an element of choice to this. You know, this is a modern, safe area of practice that improves efficiency.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that with respect to our colleagues in surgery or wherever, they can choose not to do this. So we've piloted successfully with a number of specialties.
Yeah.
I don't think the language of piloting with other specialties is what we're talking about, is it?
No, it's more of we're now in a kind of rollout.
Okay.
Rather than piloting. Yeah, I agree. There's no choice. The original pilots, which occurred in paediatrics and a few other specialties, was to basically iron out any issues. We've done that now. We're now in the rollout phase.
Right, so
yeah.
it's just the language that's
Yeah.
used here is one of choice, and you can't have all bar one specialty doing this. That's really unsafe.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think the end of this year is a very long while away, actually. We need to be demonstrating productivity before that. So I would politely ask, looking at the NEDs, that could we see that accelerated in any way?
Okay.
I know there's support with IT issues, that sort of thing, but it does seem a very long while for a relatively small number of individuals who have to use this.
Yeah. I'll ask them to review the timeline for it and see whether, given the resources, because it is quite intensive, both in terms of the setting up of the system for that specific.
Yeah, no, I understand that. That may be a time later. If it could be just, relayed as how important we view this as a board.
Yeah.
Because it really, I don't think anybody ever feels from those steps probably. This is key to us understanding what patients need.
Okay.
So moving on to
patient initiated follow up is currently in a test environment within our care flow system to make sure that the system actually is responsive if somebody is put on a patient initiated follow up pathway, which is for people who aren't aware is rather than patients being put on a regular 3 monthly, 6 monthly follow up cycle, they are told we are going to place you on a patient initiated follow up pathway, which basically means you won't be given a new appointment unless you ask them. And this is unless you ask us for another appointment. It works most. It works more smoothly within chronic condition pathways where individual patients manage their own conditions from a day-to-day basis, and only tend to want to see the consultant when their condition changes. And that's something that again we aren't necessarily in tune with, because we often provide that kind of 6 monthly review whether the person wants it or not. So and the feedback from the NHS where it is widely used is very positive from both the capacity, productivity, utilisation point of view, as well as the patient feedback. So as it stands, we are just piloting, well not piloting, but we're just testing out the functionality of the care flow system in terms of its ability to manage PIFU pathways effectively. We have already developed all our internal SOPs to manage it. So again, it is just a piece of the only thing that's needed is actually that testing to be complete. So once that is done, we're able to launch it. We are quite keen to, and I'll come on to this later, is to only launch the PIFU pathways once our waiting lists are fully validated. Just because we might have a situation where there's patients who are potentially placed on a PIFU pathway that haven't been fully validated. So
they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
But really, I mean, this is I can see my consultant by using the app. What we should be much more technically aware.
Yeah, definitely.
And indeed, I met a patient who is just coming up to her 90th birthday, and I met her shopping in Hampstead, and she told me that she just WhatsApped her consultant on her iPad because she hadn't seen him for a few months. She wanted to know how he was. I said I thought that wasn't quite the point of this is we underestimate the ability of the public to respond to positive opportunities like this.
Definitely.
And in terms of waiting list validation,
so
how are we doing?
So we're now in from the technical and administrative validation, we've validated, as you can see there, 55,000 new and 23,000 follow-up instances on the care flow system, and we've removed nearly 2,000 referrals. That is a process that is still not complete, and it's a bit like the painting the fourth bridge. It never will be quite complete. In terms of clinical validation, we've discussed this, I think certainly at the board and definitely board subcommittees for quite a number of months in terms of getting some momentum around the business case. I'm glad that Sean in particular has managed to get the DHSC to acknowledge that because it is a non-recurrent piece of work, that it would be suitable to fall under the transformation programme. And I believe, I know that has been included in this year's spending paper that is going to go to Treasury for the entirety of the clinical validation process, which will see every person who's on our waiting list currently, whether it's waiting a new or follow appointment, to be validated by a clinician. And so that's a really good progress. We're just obviously waiting for the feedback from that. I've put in some data just around the 2 pilots that we've undertaken already around clinical validation, one in respiratory and one in gastroenterology. And you can see the proportions of patients who have been discharged, which are quite phenomenal. Respiratory, again, is a very high level of discharge because respiratory is actually also piloting the advice and guidance service. So what Dr. Homewood is doing is discharging the patients with the advice and guidance that she would have provided if the patients had gone through that process. What we're really keen to do is make sure that the clinical validation process doesn't place additional burden onto the GPs. So we are keen, and well, we have done already for the pilots, and are very keen to do it when it comes to the actual full clinical validation, is to implement a type of PIFU, which is like, we are discharging you, but this is how to get back into the service if you feel your conditions are, so basically, so patients don't need to go back to the GPs to be referred in, so it's much more responsive. And the work that we're doing around making sure that the PIFU functionality on Careflow will support that. So so in terms of recommendations, clearly we'll continue the rollout of e-triage and e-outcomes. I got the language right on that one, just not the previous. So thank you. So pursue the funding, as I've mentioned, for implementation of full clinical validation, and then complete the required testing so that we can, once we've got the clinical validation process funded, we can make sure that those patients that are clinically validated but do have a way back into the service through a PIFU pathway are correctly documented and recorded on Medway or Careflow, sorry. So
yeah, I think the patient safety element's really well described. Thank you.
yeah.
So I think given that this is a mandate requirement, I don't know why we're waiting for the transformation funds to be released by the Department of Health. So I think we might slightly raise that at the board tomorrow. Because it's now May. So we're halfway through quarter one, so let's get on with it. This is really important work. It's really important to have public confidence in this. And I know that a couple of queries have come to me and they've been answered extremely well. And they have also helped us understand areas that we can do. So Chris, how is this going down with the medical leadership teams?
I think they recognise the direction of travel, and I think they recognise the importance of it. There, as is always the case, a range of early adopters versus individuals that want to see everybody else test out and find the problems. But I think everybody recognises it, and in fact Oliver called out a really good example, which is the respiratory team.
Yeah.
Actually, it isn't that all of those referrals are inappropriate, it's the fact that we haven't got the right pathways.
Yes.
And they've responded admirably in that challenge, and have come up with a host of alternative pathways which work better for everybody.
Yeah, I think that there are hidden benefits to this as well. You sort of see, gosh, there's a new pathway developing, and that's fantastic, because it gives clinicians that sense of control as well, which is important. So thank you, Oliver. Oliver?
Thank you.
Why are you all sitting together? It's all very confusing.
Clumped up together, aren't we? No, I think this is really important, and I think the sort of moving to sort of that electronic systems where you've got audit trails, you can prove what happened, when and where, and be assured that a referral doesn't get lost simply because it falls, behind the sofa is very, very important. I know that it's quite complex, the system around PIC and referrals. How far are we from being paperless when it comes to managing referrals and discharge and patient management?
I think, well, as Wendy challenged, I think it's the speed of us being able to roll it out. But I'll ask the team to really.
Sorry, I mean, in terms of, is this it? Once all this is done, is this us paperless, or is there other stuff that?
No. So referrals, well, as you know, because you probably send us a few every day. They come into the organisation electronically. They go on to Careflow. At the moment, for those referrals that haven't got the electronic system, they're printed off. They're put back into the system, and then at the end they're printed up again. So this will, once e-triage and e-outcomes are implemented, and the clinical validation process is done, we will be entirely paperless. So from all new referrals coming in will be managed paperless, and then once the clinical validation, all of the kind of historical paper that is within PIC, all the referrals will be then processed as per that clinical validation. So, we're aiming for if we can get the clinical validation funding identified ASAP, about 6 month timeline for that. So by the end of the calendar year, we would be in a situation where we know that the data that we publish to GPs, to the public, to our own consultants is going to be correct. So that the number that they see on the screen of the waiting time is the waiting time that the patients will be able to expect.
Tim, then your final word to Teresa.
Just going to say, really welcome this. Really helpful. Obviously, the issues people have heard me say before elsewhere, having been trapped in a loop of doom, really, trying to get out of outpatients appointments, where every year they say, Mr. Bishop, you're fat, and come back in a year's time. You go back in a year's time, and they say, Mr. Bishop, you're still fat. So a system like this, which means you can eject yourself from it, would be really great. And then just the more serious side, really assured that people who have special needs, are protected within that system as well. That's really good to hear. And to agree with the chair in terms of the funding and the money. Having been here for some years, where there have been really good projects and have just been hamstrung by there being money there, but it just not being released. I think we really need to put some pressure on to get these things in the train.
Sorry, and Oliver did just touch on a comment, but I think it's incredibly important. For what good looks like for me is when clinicians own their waiting list. They've got really good quality data. They have accurate waiting list data. So they can inform their patients, and they take ownership. And they sit down with their service managers on a monthly basis and manage that waiting list well. And that's the sort of level of distributed leadership and ownership of waiting list management we want to see. And I'm just really keen that we have that position as quickly as possible so our clinicians know what they're managing and can help us manage some of that clinical risk.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really important point. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Oliver. It's really, really exciting to see this. But it is quick. I know it sounds that we're moaning about how long it takes, but this is a big step for this organisation and for some of our colleagues. So well done. Thank you very much. Helen, people, culture and engagement update.
So a little administrative update before I look in the details. So the leader of the workforce and culture team, Louise Quayle, is moving at the end of this month into a role in the Department of Health and Social Care. And as a consequence of that, DHSC are taking the opportunity to parse out workforce and culture activity from their transformation portfolio and give it a lock, stock and barrel to Manx Care. So this will become in-house activity that will be directed and managed by us in the organisation. So
we've got you.
So that happens from the 1st of June. That work will come back in-house and the budget comes along with it. Last time we brought this work to board, the board recommended that we take the initial findings and focus down on 3 or 4 key elements that we felt were most essential. And we've done that work in collaboration with our divisions, looking at the things that they would most like to focus on across their own workforce and the challenges that they were facing. So the first one is very much associated to the work that Sheila's done launching the senior matrons, because there's now a significant body of research evidence that links issues of exhaustion and burnout with leadership behaviours and empowerment behaviours across the clinical workforce. And the work that particularly has come out of the Netherlands and Belgium focuses on the empowerment of the nursing workforce as the single most important factor with regards to dealing with issues of exhaustion and burnout across the workforce. So I think for us, for Workforce and Culture, this is the absolute perfect moment to start supporting the matrons and the senior matrons in rolling out our expectations as an organisation with regards to those empowering behaviours and the expectations that we have for behavioural standards right across the workforce. And in order to do that, we are using as a starting point the values and behaviours model that is enshrined in the NHS Constitution, because what that document does is in each of the key values areas that we have at Manx Care, it gives really clear examples of behavioural expectations and also the expectations that we absolutely do not expect to see across the workforce. And I feel like so far that's been missing. We've been very clear about saying the kind of things we want to see and the ways of working we like. What we've not done, and we've been criticised in a number of different forums for doing that, we've not been explicit about the kind of behaviours that are not acceptable across our organisation. So that is the piece of work that we will be focusing on in the next period, because we feel that that will give us the most bang for our buck in terms of supporting positive cultural change across the organisation. Mindful of the fact that this is not something that the Workforce and Culture team is going to do on behalf of the organisation. It's very much about having a facilitating and supporting role. Likewise, in the past, I think Workforce and Culture team have been a little bit guilty of delivering work where they've been invited in. And we know that where people welcome support is not necessarily where support is most desperately needed. And so as an exec team, we are going to look at the areas where we believe the most impact is likely to be delivered, and work particularly with the leadership triumvirates under the new organisational structure to deliver that work on behalf of the organisation. The other key thing that has come out very clearly from the work that we've done with divisions is that the gap, I suppose, between the way that we expect and the way that we try to treat one another as colleagues, and the treatment that particularly our frontline staff often receive from our patients and service users. And colleagues have told us that that is an area that they would like us to focus on in terms of expectations for how colleagues in practice are treated by the people who use our services, because that seems to be a key theme, that there might be a thread of this with regards to ED&I issues and practitioners who look different from their patients potentially, or sound different from their patients. And I think the organisation is very clear that all of our clinicians in all circumstances should be treated with dignity and respect. And there is a thread that is not happening. And I think those are the key areas that we're going to focus on moving forward.
Thank you. Really helpful. And I really like the idea of supporting teams that need it. Because that's a really important thing, particularly as they're new and they're forming and there's all sorts of challenges around them. So I really like that. I think the board fully supports absolutely zero tolerance of our staff being treated badly in whatever sense at all. I'm very happy to front up anything that will help with that. It's unacceptable, and it does damage much more than that individual's morale, but teams, and then people start workarounds, all sorts of things. So it's a really important point. Thank you. Sheila?
Yeah, just to say, Chair Helen, this is brilliant. This is work we must do. You're absolutely right, and I really value, and the research has shown you have to be explicit of what good looks like and what bad looks like, and what we'll tolerate and what we absolutely won't tolerate, and that's both for staff and for patients and the public. So really supportive of that, and as you said, in terms of those senior matrons, the launch of that, the raising the standards of attitude and behaviour, and most people are absolutely fine, but it's a small number of people who are ruining it for everybody else, and we can't walk past it. So really, really supportive. Thank you for it.
Any other comments from anyone? Yeah.
Just really welcome that. I think the comment about the teams that request your assistance, and perhaps not the teams that you need to be giving assistance to, is really important. But again, if there are some green shoots there, and people want to take that forward, I'm sure you'll be open to that as well. And I think that in terms of the zero tolerance, we have to be aware that it's an ever-changing picture, but it is in some part to do with the current news items and what people see happening across the world, not just on the Isle of Man or not just within the UK. So I think that one has to be cognizant of that in terms of what the feel is and how that then gets pulled through into those interactions. So really important. Thank you.
Nigel.
Thank you. I've been a member of this board now for 4 years, and I've had this feeling for a long time, and I've expressed it on a number of occasions, that there's sort of been this disconnect between the whole organisation and the board. I've seen nothing but professionalism, courtesy, robust discussion with this board in the period that I've been on it. But I've often felt, and I've often heard in the community, messages that message is not getting through because of either blockages or practices or ways in which certain groups of individuals or individuals are working, sometimes to their patients, sometimes together, sometimes to their seniors. And somehow that message of courtesy and trying to do the right thing hasn't been getting through. I'm a great optimist. I believe that most people get up in the morning wanting to do a good day's job, wanting to do good day's work. But sometimes there are blockages, and that could be fear, it could be concern, it could be fear of bullying or fear of being singled out. And I often felt that was the case. So I'm really, really pleased to hear that we've got these initiatives on the go to get to grips with this and to get that messaging out. What we do about it is another thing, because that's very difficult. And it's like social media, isn't it? It's completely unfiltered. It allows people to have a go, if you like, without any restrictions whatsoever, or very few restrictions. And I think it's time it's finished, because, it's distracting so much from so much of the great work that is going on in this organisation, bringing about the right kind of change, taking time, admittedly, against difficult budgets, but bringing about the right kind of change for the right reasons to serve the people of the Isle of Man better. Hallelujah. But we need to stop those who are stopping that from happening, however we do it. And to highlight it and get it on the table, there's got to be a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Good point to end on, but thank you, Helen, really helpful and very pertinent at this time of change for us all. Thank you. And then we're moving on to the March Management Accounts. I think you're taking this much to choose.
I am. Yeah. Thank you. So as Nigel said earlier, we have achieved what we committed to achieve back at the start of January, where we committed to not overspend by any more than 15 million, which was then adjusted as we got agreement up to £800,000 worth of additional overspend due to not stopping the elective programme. So I think that's broadly positive. As we said, we wouldn't have ever wanted to have overspent at all, but the fact that we have delivered on that commitment, which we committed to at the start of the calendar year, is positive. And just sort of unpicking why that is the case. I mean, I think we've talked a lot about the real pressure around tertiary and off-island care. So of that 15 million, 5 million of that is around budgetary pressures in off-island care. We set a very ambitious CIP programme at the start of last year of £19 million, and we will have delivered more likely £12 million. So that's 7 million of the 15, and then there has been some operational pressures. So I think, what we have is a level of visibility and accountability of the areas where we have spent. On pages sort of 5 and 6, I think we can share a very positive story around our continued focus on recruitment of substantive staff, which is better for health and care delivery. And Helen did some analysis, which is essentially suggesting that we have reduced the vacancy factor. And remember, Manx Care inherited what was reported as a 22% vacancy factor, and we reported that consistently, is much more like 12 now. So we have reduced the vacancy factor of the organisation by 10%. Consequently, we have obviously seen an increase in headcount, which we know there is great scrutiny. But again, in our reporting to government, we are very clearly able to explain where that headcount is and the types of roles that headcount is to increase. And the portion of, we don't like the term, but it's language people understand, is that front line. You can see the significant reductions in agency spend, in bank spend year on year since Manx Care was started. And I think the other page that I just wanted to draw people's attention to, and I will talk about it tonight at the annual public meeting, is page 10 of the pack, which talks about ultimately how much money is required to effectively stand still by this organisation. So you will see that our pay awards, both the pay awards for the Public Service Commission, our Manx Care pay and terms and conditions, and the recent award to medical staff, that is £11 million worth of additional costs in this financial year just to meet the demands of the pay award. And then other contract inflationary costs, increased costs of drugs and tertiary activity, 10 million. So there's some significant numbers which ultimately accumulate that broadly standing still requires £25 million of additional funding into the organisation every year. And I think it is important to share the magnitude of some of those costs when we talk about the totality. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions. I will try and answer them. But yeah, I'm very satisfied.
Really just to highlight the agency and bank spend. It's really good progress, and it's really good progress to see the agency spend going down and not to see the bank spend going up. So there's been some real progress there in terms of getting permanent people into jobs, and that's really good. And I think your point made on the 25.5 million pounds is really important, because it's year on year. And it's not just give us 25 million this year and it's all going to be all right. This is what's needed for this year, and it will be needed again next year if the pay awards are of the same nature. So it's not just about a one-off. It's ongoing year on year. And I think that's really important. Thank you.
Wendy, there's always going to be a focus on the money, and it's quite right that it should be focused on the money. But I think it highlights to me, as we start the new financial year, when there is massive pressure on costs, and that's not going to stop, is a paper that Ollie put to the board some time ago, and that is around the demographics of the island. And it highlights that, and it highlights it to me in a way that we are something like the fourth oldest country in the world, are 85,000 people, because something like 24% of our population are over the age of 65. In 10 years' time, it's forecast, thank God, and I hope, to be 35% of our population will be over the age of 65. And this will translate into a massive funding requirement. So there is a tsunami coming down the tracks towards our island, and therefore us. Therefore, it absolutely highlights the imperative of the kind of work that Michelle is doing in terms of that integration and that interactive care, and also the digitisation that we were talking about in terms of making the money we spend more efficient. We will never spend less money. but we may make it more efficient. So I think these are points that we've got to absolutely keep in mind at this board level, in public, and keep ramming that message home.
Thank you. Chris?
I think that's great to hear, Nigel, and it's certainly a conversation that occupies exec time thinking. We spend a lot of time, quite rightly, in worrying about today's problems and sorting out today's problems, but we do so at our peril if we don't also protect the time to think 5 and 10 years down the line, because the solutions in 10 years' time have to start now. And when you think about where healthcare is going, AI, changes in the population, dealing with over-medicalisation, issues in terms of supporting wider government, in terms of the island plan, they're all things that take a lot of time to think through and to put into place, and we need to be spending time doing that now. So certainly Sheila and I have started conversations with clinical colleagues, supported with the rest of the exec team for exactly the points that you raised.
No, I think I think we're at the stage where we now understand a lot more about the money, and we've been much more transparent about that, which I think, thank you, Nigel, and your committee's done a huge amount of work in that space. I think sharing that understanding widely is really important. Some drug costs of 28%, is huge, and people really don't understand what that means. That's multi-millions of pounds. We are seeing more patients than ever. We're doing more operations than ever. We are actively increasing it, and I think we almost need, I feel, a sort of Tony Blair pledge card. This is what we're spending, but this is what we're doing. I do think that our messaging is improving. I think we've got quite a long way to go in understanding, how much money does it cost and how much do we need and where is that conversation happening. But those are things that Chris, you and Sheila know they are happening around the department tables now, which is really helpful. And I know the rhetoric is always difficult and the questions are always quite aggressive, but we should be welcoming that at this stage in our maturity. This is, we are an organisation that is, we're sorted. We understand where our issues are. We have a plan and a sense of purpose that I think we've perhaps not really had the opportunity to focus on. An organisation that started during the biggest pandemic the world's ever seen. It's extraordinary we've got to this point. We are only in our 5th year, so we need to say congratulations. One of the things I think that we're beginning to do is to relate the financial papers to the patient outcomes. We know it is safer to have a substantive member of staff than an agency or indeed a bank member. When I arrived, that wasn't the rhetoric. It was just about bringing down the spend. And I'm really pleased that we've now got clinicians out there with giving that message that this is about improving care. That is our purpose. I'm really pleased with that. So I know this year is going to be very hard financially, but we can build on what we went through last year. So again, thank you very much to the committee and all the team that work behind the scenes, and indeed our Treasury colleagues who are now asking questions in a way in which we can actually answer them, which is it's a big step forward in speaking the same language. So thank you very much. That concludes the business of the board. We've had some written questions from Mr. Mann, who sent his apologies because he couldn't come today. It's rather strange having a board meeting in public without Mr. Mann sitting here, but we'll respond to those. One area that he's written about, which I think is really important, we might perhaps want to think about a board session on that, is end-of-life care. I'm a bit hazy about how we commission and who and what, and I've met with the hospice people and that sort of thing, but I think it might be worth, Sheila, I think we've sent the questions to you. Perhaps if we look at that as a board in public session, then we can hear from the people delivering, that'd be helpful. But thank you very much, everyone. And I look forward to seeing those of you that can walk at the AGM this evening, which is in
The Roundhouse.
Which is walking distance from here.
Which is walking distance, just across the car park.
Okay. Well, I look forward to seeing people there. So thank you very much, everyone.